Okay, so here we have my level as it is right now from the previous level and the previous videos that we had. You can see that down here we have our main start, which goes into our array for our lights, uh, along with our little puzzle for our elevator that goes up to the key to grab it to move on. But now we're over in this area from starting here onward over through here. These two big areas are what we worked on and added in this time around, and this is a little bit of setup for next, because this was more of a add in some more functionality than anything else. So first off, we have our little camera here, which actually, whatever this cone sees, actually prints over to here. And as we see right now, we're seeing in that hallway, as it was in that other room. And then we have our little teleporter over here that we use our script to cause a possession of a different player controller. So first off, I'm going to play through it, and then we'll see how I'll explain how it works. So starting off over here, we have our little camera, which as you can see, it also moves. We used a timeline with a branching path to flip-flop between it playing in forward and reverse. So that was a pretty cool thing to get working. So it'll iterate between constantly as soon as the game starts. And then over here, we have our take control of other people by pressing E in machine. And then this is our little teleporter machine. We press E here, and now we're in control of this other character, which goes into this next part, which is where we're adding in our functionality for the next task we're going to be doing, which is adding in stealth mechanics. So I thought this room might be a cool way to start that off. And then we have our little animation on our camera also plays over here, so you can see it actually scan from left to right. That was the main thing, and then it was optimizing a bunch of stuff that we did previously so that it worked a little bit better. So let's get into how we actually made this work from start to finish. So first off, we added in another one of our signs. All we did was make a different set for its text string, and that was for the new controls we added for our teleporter. Over here, we have our security camera and how we actually got that to work. It was between using this material of our view screen texture of whatever it sees and attributing that onto our blueprint, which over here has a scene capture component 2 right on the front of this cone. And we put our little pivot point here, and that's where everything moves from. So it's a pretty cool way to do it. And then when we go back over to our event graph, we see every tick, it's going to have a delay of 4 seconds for when it's allowed to go through. And we put a flip-flop on this between two different timelines. Now, these two different timelines each are attributed to their own track, which is new track 6 and new track 7, which allow this to play the animation that we need. First, we need it to play from start, and then we need to play it in reverse because we're set from our original position. So we have to play it backwards at a negative for that to work. And then it's just add to relative location on our delta Z yaw rotation from our scene element as the pivot point. So pretty simple there. It has actually took me far longer because I was trying to do stuff where I would just have the event tick lead into timeline 0, and it would iterate from timeline 0, go through its whole thing, and then it would feed directly into timeline 2 and then try to loop off the end of timeline 2. But this just ended up being a cleaner and more simple way that actually worked quite well for our implementation. Then over here we have our trigger box 2, which is actually our teleporter. So what we ended up having to do is this works, first I have to clarify, this works far better if we are using a third person character to set our start position. So we start off that character's position instead of how I have it laid out right now, which is start position, and then we have a character 0, which is our character 2. But in this case, we have our player index 0 because we only have one player. On the beginning and end of overlap and beginning of play, we disable the input of the first one and then on begin overlap, we get the player controller and we enable input. This allows us to actually flip-flop between the two of them as long as we're going over checkpoint area. So, hence the machine. So if when I set this up correctly, using two different actors in the level, what we'll end up having is our actor over here, this one, which is our character 2. What we actually have this trigger box attributed to is our first person character 2. And this basically says you're going to go over to that other character when we use this blueprint. So what ends up happening is we press E in our trigger box to unpossess the character we're using right now, and then we possess the target, and then we disable input of the now unpossessed character, so it stays in the same spot. Overall, that was pretty simple. Then also for our other functionality, we have some gates here as our flow points, along with the security camera, the flip-flop flow point. Then we also have for each loop flow point, and then we used a few other things throughout that just simplified everything instead of making it very intensive as it was, because I was using about this much for every blueprint instead of the much cleaner version of this. And I have probably 5 or 6 different flow points, and then I have my 3 timelines, and these 2 on the security camera, and then our blueprint for our door that we added in our first video that we're using a lerp vector for instead of using what we did over here. We used timeline with the timeline edits here as our main way of doing it instead of actually adding in matinee. So that is what's new, and we're preparing to add in our functionality for the next part over here already, which will be working with AI and a few other things. So I'm planning on adding in the room that we have here, along with a little passage here into another puzzle room, and expanding this off with a door that's locked until the player finishes their possession here, and then it continues back on the main character. That's everything for this update. I'll catch you in the next one where we add in some more stealth mechanics. See you then.